Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into, honestly, one of the most profound mysteries of the human experience. I mean, why do we need love so deeply? And on the flip side of that, why is heartbreak just so incredibly devastating when it all falls apart? Now, for well over a century, some of the most brilliant minds have been trying to figure out the precise mechanics of human connection. We all kind of know the basics of attachment theory, right? But today we're going to explore a really groundbreaking idea that the classic attachment theory we all know and study, well, it was never actually complete. Let's start right at the top with a fundamental mystery. Why do human beings become attached in the first place? Have you ever noticed how rejection just absolutely stings your very core? Or how some people become almost emotionally addictive to us, like they take over your every waking thought, while other people who, might look absolutely perfect on paper barely affect us at all? Well, it's not random, and it's definitely not just fate. There is a deep, hidden psychological architecture at play here, and today we're going to map the whole thing out. And this brilliantly illustrates how over 100 years of genius psychologists tried to answer this exact question. You've got Sigmund Freud looking at unconscious desires back in the 1890s, then Carl Jung exploring projection in the 1910s. Fast forward to John Bowlby focusing on survival in the 50s, and Donald Winnicott studying emotional attunement in the 60s. Now, each of these legends had a massive, game-changing breakthrough. But here's the secret. Each of them really only found one piece of the puzzle. They were all actually describing different layers of the exact same system. To put these puzzle pieces together, we really have to start at the absolute foundation. Layer 1, wired for survival. Okay, let's dive into this. Before we can even talk about romance or poetry or the magic of love, we have to ground this abstract mystery right into the physical body itself. Because at our core, human beings are biological creatures. Our very first connections in this world are quite literally a matter of life or death. John Bowlby completely revolutionized psychology by proposing that children attach to caregivers primarily because, well, it increases their chances of survival. The nervous system is just constantly seeking proximity to safety. And based on those super early experiences of feeling safe or unsafe, we develop an emotional blueprint. You end up secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Bowlby showed us something really profound here. Relationships don't just happen to us. They literally shape the nervous system itself. Your body learns early on whether closeness equals safety and whether vulnerability leads to comfort or to danger. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how modern neuroscience adds a critical, kind of sneaky twist to Bowlby's work. Our nervous systems aren't just scanning for safety. They're actually constantly scanning for familiarity. And this totally explains a phenomenon I know so many of us have experienced or seen in friends. If you grew up around emotional inconsistency, your body actually interprets anxiety, longing, and unpredictability as chemistry. That is exactly why chaotic relationships can feel so incredibly addictive, while emotionally healthy, peaceful relationships can initially feel unfamiliar or even flat and boring to you. Your body is basically looking around going, wait, where is the chaos? Because chaos feels familiar to the nervous system. Peace feels totally unfamiliar.
Which brings us to layer 2, mirrors and false selves.
Now, we are infinitely more complicated than just simple biology, right? We're seeking something psychologically much, much deeper. And this is exactly where human attachment steps out of pure survival and gets intensely fascinating. Enter Carl Jung. Jung believed human beings project the unconscious parts of themselves directly onto other people. Just think about the sheer scale of what we project onto someone. Strength, beauty, confidence, freedom, emotional depth, creativity, masculinity, femininity, literally wholeness itself. We take what's unfinished or unexpressed or hidden within our own minds, and we just paste it onto someone else. And suddenly, that person feels entirely extraordinary to us. They seem completely larger than life.
So, the crucial point is that what we commonly call chemistry might not actually be love at all. I want you to really think about that for a second. Sometimes chemistry is simply identity activation. We're reacting to our own unresolved emotional history. We aren't necessarily attaching to the actual person standing right in front of us. We're attaching to the dormant part of ourselves that they somehow managed to awaken. And this brings us to a rather tragic clinical concept introduced by Donald Winnicott, the false self. Imagine a child learning that if they express their true, messy, authentic emotions, they might actually lose the love or attention of their caregiver. If authenticity threatens attachment, the child adapts. They learn to perform. They learn to please. They completely hide their vulnerability and figure out how to become emotionally useful to others. It's so sad because they internalize this heavy, heartbreaking message: belonging matters more than authenticity.
And honestly, so many of us carry this straight into our adult lives. Instead of asking, who am I? We unconsciously ask, what version of me keeps people connected to me? When you operate this way, your romantic relationships and even your friendships, they just become a performance instead of a genuine connection. Over time, in that absolutely exhausting effort to keep everyone else attached to you, you slowly, silently lose contact with yourself. Let's move to and see how this builds into layer 3, the architecture of the self. We are stepping fully into the realm of self-psychology right now, looking at the structural mechanics of our identity. It's not just about how we relate to others, but how others physically prop up the house of our own minds. Think of it like this. We unconsciously use our relationships as the psychological scaffolding for our own identity cohesion. We literally rely on other people to stabilize our self-worth, to maintain our identity continuity, to regulate our deep-seated shame, and to preserve our overall psychological structure. We are basically leaning our internal architecture straight against the people we love, just to keep ourselves upright. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful and probably very familiar quote, "I feel like I lost myself." I want you to take a second and think about a time you experienced true gut-wrenching heartbreak. Why is it so incredibly devastating? It's because the loss isn't just relational, it is structural. Part of your actual identity became psychologically attached to the relationship itself. So when the relationship ends, you aren't just losing a partner who you had dinner with, you're losing the scaffolding of your own self. Psychologically speaking, you actually did lose yourself. Moving right along to layer 4, symbolic attraction. This leads us to our final foundational piece. We like to think of our attractions as purely logical or rational, right? We list out all these traits like compatibility, shared interests, a good sense of humor. But the truth is, attraction is deeply symbolic long before it is ever rational. Sometimes a partner unconsciously represents something massive for us: freedom, redemption, power, innocence, emotional safety, transformation, or even transcendence. We attach to the internal meaning that the person carries for us. And this is exactly why idealization can be so blindingly intense. It's why we sometimes stay deeply attached to someone long after the actual day-to-day compatibility has completely disappeared. Your psyche is attaching to the symbol, not just the human being making breakfast in your kitchen. And this brings us to the grand reveal. The reveal, identity completion theory. This is the climax of everything we've been uncovering in this explainer today. If we weave all these historical threads together, from Bowlby's survival instincts to Jung's projections to Winnicott's true and false selves and modern neuroscience, we arrive at a single, unified truth. It's a multi-layered system. It starts at the base with survival, moves up to nervous system regulation, involves projection, takes on symbolic meaning, leads to identity stabilization, and finally points toward integration. What this ultimately means is that human beings unconsciously attach to people who temporarily create a feeling of internal completion. They activate the unfinished aspects of our own identity. Basically, they fill our gaps. But, and this is a big but, as long as our identity is externally dependent on someone else, suffering is absolutely inevitable when things change. The ultimate final goal of attachment isn't dependency. It's not emotional fusion or constantly performing just to get love. The goal is integration. True secure attachment means you can remain authentic, you can stay emotionally connected without losing your identity, you can regulate your own nervous system internally, tolerate emotional ambiguity, and love deeply without self-abandonment. The ultimate goal of attachment is true internal wholeness. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to reflect on as you look at your own relationships, both past and present. Ask yourself, are you attaching to a person or the part of yourself they awaken? Thank you so much for exploring this totally fascinating topic with me today. Keep seeking, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.